Well, as we continue to remember Brian Mulroney, we are happy to welcome on the program today Perrin Beatty. These days, the president and the CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, but of course he held several portfolios in the Mulroney government, including Minister of National Revenue, Minister of Health, and Solicitor General of Canada. Mr. Beatty, always good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, I want to begin here with the message on social media that you sent out in the wake of the announcement of Mr. Mulroney's death. And in this post, you write, "Under Brian Mulroney's leadership, Canada became more confident, more prosperous, and more respected in the world. I will always be grateful to have known him and to have had the privilege of serving with him." You know, I want to begin in particular with that first part, when you say that Canada became more confident under Brian Mulroney. How?
There was a sense that we could contribute to solving problems both in Canada and around the world as well. And you could see with the relationships that he built with other world leaders, for example, that Canada was seen as a strategic partner, and that Canada's advice, our counsel, our voice was welcomed in international meetings, and we were listened to. It made a real difference.
Made a real difference, as you say. But you know, I do wonder about your relationship with Mr. Mulroney, in particular your first impressions of him, because you are younger than Mr. Mulroney was, but you were elected before him right out of university. You were also in Joe Clark's cabinet. What did you think of Mr. Mulroney in those early years?
I had actually worked very hard against Brian Mulroney. I'd supported Joe Clark at the Leadership Convention in 1984. And I expected that I was going to be sent into exile, that I'd be in Siberia somewhere, and that I might not have a political future. He did exactly the opposite. What he did was to reach out to people who hadn't supported him, and he brought us in to the center. I mentioned it to him one day and said, you know, I found it truly extraordinary that you reached out and that you've treated me the way that you have. And he said, as far as I was concerned, the day that the convention was over, we turned a page. And we're all part of the same team. When somebody does something like that, it builds such a sense of loyalty and commitment that it's really remarkable. And so, as your previous panel was saying, the relationship he had with caucus was so incredibly strong that even when we were down to 10% in the polls, members of caucus would have crawled over broken glass to support him in any way that they could. An extraordinary manager of people, and the relationships that he built were just amazing.
Mm-hmm. How did that change your own life, I wonder, though? Because, you know, as you said, he reached out to someone who is in the government before him, Joe Clark, who he succeeds as conservative leader. And then not only brings you into the inner circle, but trusts you, this young gun, to play major roles in his government. How did that change your life?
Well, it taught me a lot about leadership. I was still I was pretty young at the time, and I'd had 9 months of experience in Joe Clark's cabinet as a cabinet minister, so barely had a chance to find out where the office was before the government was defeated. He was bringing me in, entrusting heavy responsibilities to me, and it taught me a great deal about how you should manage people. This was perhaps the last time that there was truly cabinet government, where essentially the marching orders we had were, you know what the government's policies are, stick with the government's policies, don't trip and fall and create problems in your department, and run your department. And there was that real sense that we weren't simply under the thumb of centralized leadership from the Prime Minister's office. It really, truly was a collegial government. But it was the Prime Minister's vision for the country and his sense of direction, the loyalty that he developed with everybody that moved all of this forward. And it was truly extraordinary. It reminds us about the importance of our political leaders should be running for office not because they simply want to hold the office, but because of what they want to do with the office. And you had in Brian Mulroney somebody who had a clear vision of what he thought that Canada could be if we did the right things. And he was prepared to spend political capital and to accept all sorts of opprobrium to move the country ahead in that direction. And we are reaping the benefits of that years and years later.
Mm-hmm. As we reflect on Mr. Mulroney, I do wonder what you hope Canadians will remember of him, what you believe they should know about Brian Mulroney as someone who worked so closely with him.
First, that he was a transformational leader, that he was visionary, he was principled, and that he was determined to be there to make a change, and he made that change for the better. Secondly, that he demonstrated that Canada could have a strong, clear, respected voice on the international stage. Third, that it was possible to solve problems if governments were prepared to lead and to apply themselves. And that it is, and that I think the other thing is the sense of decency, that we need to restore civility in Canadian politics again, where it's possible to disagree with somebody, but not to hate them, and to understand the difference between being an opponent and being an enemy, or that somebody sitting across from you can be wrong without being evil. We need to restore a civil dialogue again, and the friendships that he developed and the support that he gave to people of all political backgrounds was really remarkable.
Perrin Beatty, as I say, I always appreciate the time you have for us. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.